Hey everyone, Merry Christmas. This is my Christmas surprise to all of you. I'm doing my personal top 50, I suppose I can get rid of this, my personal top 50 uh, games just of all time. I'm going to try to make this a yearly thing that I do every Christmas. Um, but I'm using the website backlogged. And first, a little disclaimer. Sorry, my webcam isn't the one that goes through my phone that is better. I am having issues connecting it, which might be because I haven't used it in a while or something. I don't know. I just didn't want to waste the time to fix it because I'm recording this at midnight right now on technically what is Christmas Day. So I don't want to mess around with it too much and end up being up all night. Okay, so overview of what this list is. Again, it's my top 50 games of all time. Um, I have played through a decent amount of most or all of these games. I don't think I've played all of them to completion. I just finished making the list, so I don't remember even what's on it. It'll be kind of a surprise to me because I was working on the bottom end and figuring out what to eliminate first. Um, but yeah, also another disclaimer. Um, I'm not a professional reviewer. This is my personal opinion and really just how I feel on these games. Basically, what I did was I grabbed a game, scrolled up, looked for a game that was kind of similar in how much I like it, and figured out if I liked it on either side. I didn't do a really in-depth analysis of like scoring for every game or aspects like that. It was mainly I looked at two games and I was like, what would I rather play, this one or this one, and then just slot it in where it belonged. But first, we're going to take a look at the 10 games that did not quite make the top 50 list. If you were on my Snapchat last year, I actually posted a top 25 using this same format. Um, and if you remember, Viva Pinata Trouble in Paradise was actually number 25 on that list, so it's dropped significantly. All these other ones are new games that would have been new to the list after I expanded to 50, but they just didn't quite make it. Metroid here. A lot of these are the NES games that I actually really like. Like, these are probably my top three NES games of all time. Metroid, Fire Emblem, Shadow Dragon and the Blade of Light, and Cobra Triangle. I really like all of those games, especially considering they're on the NES. They just didn't quite make the list. And then Shovel Knight as well is another one that was on my top 25 last year, and it just didn't make the cut. Sonic Generations, it's a game that I really like, but it's really buggy almost after playing other, like, I don't want to say legit Sonic games, but like the original three, the original trilogy, playing Sonic Mania. Like, the 2D Sonic physics are just really weird, and it doesn't feel quite natural in the 2D environments. I do really like the idea that it has and like the levels that are picked. It also felt like it could have been a little more expansive though. Super Monkey Ball 2 is a fun game, but it's oh, it's really difficult. Like, it's one of those games that's like really annoyingly hard, and it knows just how to troll you and push your buttons too. Also, yeah, if you're making it this far in the video, you should know this is basically going to be me just rambling about games. So if you want to just turn it on in the background, it's going to be a podcasty type video. I'm probably going to upload some videos for my senior recital throughout the day as well. Just a side note, because I've been meaning to upload those because that happened over a month ago, but I just keep forgetting, and I've been so busy taking all my like student teaching tests and all that stuff because I'm student teaching in the spring. And then there's Rayman Legends, which it's a solid 2D platformer, but I haven't played a whole lot of it, and from what I have played, it wasn't terribly memorable. It was really fun, and it was like up there in 2D platformers. As you'll see, I have a lot of those on my list. It just didn't quite make the cut. And then again, I talked about Shadow Dragon and the Blade of Light. That game, I think, is really spectacular for an NES game with everything that it accomplishes. Um, and I speedran it once, never again. I had the world record for like a month or two. Never doing that again. It was hard on the brain. Um, but it's super cool to see like where Fire Emblem came from, and like the original game actually had a lot going for it. Jackbox Party Pack 3, I think, is a really solid party game, and it's the only like multiplayer heavy game that you'll see on my list. Well, it's not even on the list. It's like the outliers. Um, it's got a lot of solid games. The only thing is you can only play Trivia Murder Party by yourself. The other ones you need a group of people, and you need people who will buy into it as well. It's only fun if you have people who are actually like pretty bought into the games on it. But all of the games are at least okay. Like there's no bad games on that list. Espionage is a little meh to me, but all the other ones are super fun. Undertale here. I love Undertale, but it was just one of those things where everything above it I think is better than it, and I would rather play than Undertale. It's one of those games that's insane the first time you play because you realize the amount of like work that got put into it. Like it feels like all of the NPCs say something important in it, and it's just a really solid, really fun RPG. But it feels like once you've seen everything, you've seen everything. A it's not a game with a horribly high replay value, but it is kind of cool to see like if you really want to see all the different like specific endings based on like who you've killed and whatnot. That is kind of cool, but again, it's not something that I desire to do. Cobra Triangle is a game that really surprised me when I played Rare Replay. I genuinely really enjoyed it, and I think it's probably my favorite. Well, not probably, it is my favorite NES game through playing it on Rare Replay. It didn't even really feel like an NES game with like quality wise. It felt like a Super Nintendo game almost. Like it had that same sort of quality, which is really speaks volumes to what Rare was able to accomplish with that one. Then is Viva Pinata Trouble in Paradise. It's the sequel to Viva Pinata. I like it, and really when you look at it, it should be, it genuinely is, I feel, a better game than the original. I played it for the first time after I speedran the original pretty heavily, so I don't have that same nostalgia for it, so that's part of it. But I just feel like the original had the perfect amount of content, and I don't know, I just felt like, I don't ever want to say a game has too much content, but it just felt like Trouble in Paradise had too much going on almost. Like it felt like almost similar to like the Pokedex cut in Pokemon should have happened, where some of the pinatas got left back in the original and it was all new ones. And there were like a couple, I think. Like I don't think the dragon, or maybe it is. I think the dragon actually is in the new one too. I don't know. I don't remember. Well, I say new, it's not that new, but you know what I mean. I just felt like it wasn't like as fun as the original, and I don't really know why. I just don't like it as much, even though there's more to do in it. Okay. I know I said I wouldn't talk very in-depth about those 10 games, but those are the outliers. And one extra note, Pokemon White, or Pokemon Black, well, Pokemon Black and White were my number 61, and those were my highest rated Pokemon, like, mainline series Pokemon games. All the other ones were below that, so no Pokemon games made the list, which kind of surprised me, because I do really like Pokemon, but I feel like it's really kind of fallen off on my, just not in general, like the series has fallen off, just like my enjoyment for mainline Pokemon games has fallen off in recent years. Okay, but now I'm going to reveal the next 10 games. So we have Ocarina of Time 3D coming in at number 50. I genuinely really like Ocarina of Time 3D. I know I complain a lot about Ocarina of Time, and I think it's overrated, but a lot of its problems come with it being a game from that time period. Ocarina of Time 3D fixes a lot of those issues, and not to mention it's portable. It streamlines a lot of things that the original doesn't do very well, like Iron Boots equipping is a lot more efficient. Water Temple is made easier to navigate and less confusing. Just a lot of quality of life fixes that make it like better than the original for sure. And just it's Ocarina of Time is just the definition of a solid game. I don't think it's a 10 out of 10 game, but I think it's just the definition of solid. It's good. It set the foundation for the series, so you can't ignore that. But again, I just think it's solid. Then coming in at 49 is Mario Party 2, which kind of surprised me how high that one got. It's well, it's my highest Mario Party on the list, but I don't know. I kind of flip flop between which ones were my favorites, but it's hard to kind of rank those among the other games. Um, it's just a really fun, solid party game, and I really miss when they were pumping them out like crazy during the N64 and GameCube days, and it's like then they started making less of them and the quality dropped, which is really weird because it's like they were making pretty much just bangers. Every Mario Party game from 8 and before, in my opinion, is really, really solid. There were a couple of duds in there. Like 1, I don't think was that good, and 4, it's either 4 or 5. I get those two confused because I don't really play either of those because I feel like 6 and 7 are the best on the GameCube. But they're just really fun party games, and I think 2 is the best of them, mainly because it really kind of, again, set the foundation for what Mario Party would be, and it had the really unique aspect of having costumes and stuff, and I think the minigame selection in Mario Party 2 is probably the best in the series. All the boards, I think, are really memorable. I just think it's probably the best Mario Party game, and why it deserves to be even on the low end of the top 50. Pokemon Legends Arceus is a game that I played for 40 hours, like the first couple weeks that it was out, and then I never touched it again. And it's a shame. Partly it's partly because I'm busy now, so I don't play video games a whole lot anymore. I'm getting old, but I genuinely loved Legends Arceus. I think it is the best Pokemon game, the most fun Pokemon game. I say this without, I haven't played Scarlet or Violet yet. I've heard that they're really good. I'm waiting on it for Christmas, so that's why you won't see it on the list. But yeah, I think Legends Arceus genuine like you can say what you want about the graphics and some glitchiness in there, but I legit just think it's a super fun game to play. Like there's just so much to do, and it captures what an open world Pokemon game I feel like should be. And it is like the perfect balance of what I like in Pokemon games. I think the battling, if you do it too much, becomes stale and just feels like the same thing over and over again. Where in Legends Arceus, the required battles are few and far between. And the wild Pokemon, you don't have to battle them, you can just chuck balls at them. And I just think it's genuinely really fun, and I really hope they do continue doing these Legends games, because it genuinely was a really, really solid entry, I think. Donkey Kong Country 3 is the only Donkey Kong Country game that I've never finished, and I've tried a couple times. I just really don't like how Kiddy Kong controls. like, I like that they tried to do something new, because they've always done that where they add a new character every Donkey Kong Country game, but they just added another slow character, whereas Dixie Kong and Diddy Kong both had their advantage, both were worthwhile to use in different situations in 2. It just felt like a downgrade to me, and it's definitely the black sheep of the series, where there are some people who love it because it's unique and different, but I think it strays a little too far from what made 1 and 2 so good. I do like it, obviously. It's in my top 50 games of all time. But yeah, and not to complain about the soundtrack, because it is good, but I don't think David Wise contributed as much, if at all, on the soundtrack in that game, and it kind of shows. Some of the music doesn't feel as Donkey Kong Country E as 1 and 2 do. But yeah, this Donkey Kong Country 3. Zelda Breath of the Wild. You might be surprised to see that game this low on the list. Again, I've played a lot of games. So even getting in the top 50 for me is a big deal. But Breath of the Wild brought like a new light into the open world genre, and it really kind of set the tone for Zelda going forward. Who knows what Tears of the Kingdom will bring? It's obviously in the same sort of world as Breath of the Wild, but I think it definitely has its shortcomings. I think gameplay-wise, it is perfect. There is no complaints with the gameplay whatsoever. I just wish for a Zelda game there was a bit more story. Like, there is story there, but... And I realize that with an open world game where you can go and do whatever you want, it's harder to integrate a real story in there because you can go anywhere at any time. But other games have done it, so... it's not impossible. Like, pretty much the only story and voice cutscenes you got were through the flashbacks that you unlocked, and, like, when you would go and fight a boss. But I also think that the Divine Beasts could have been different, a little more different than the shrines. Like, I know you can, like, rotate them and move the parts and whatnot, but I just felt like it just felt like a big shrine to me, and I thought there could have been more differences in gameplay there. But again, like, gameplay-wise, it is legitimately, like, perfect. It's just... It doesn't fulfill me the same way that other Zelda games do. Next is Super Mario Sunshine. This is a pretty nostalgic pick for me, because I just have a lot of nostalgia for Mario Sunshine. It was one of the first games that I ever played. But I think it can get annoyingly difficult at times, and that is like the only Mario game that always takes me a while to adjust back into the physics of. I don't know. Even Mario 64, I can get a handle on the physics again, like, a bit better than Mario Sunshine. It always takes me a bit. And, again, it's not as hard now as it was when I was a kid. But, like, that was one of those games that, like, as a kid, it just felt unbeatable. Because there were so many just stupidly difficult shine sprites to get. But, yeah, that's my feelings on it. Katamari Damacy Reroll, I think, is a really fun game. It's short, but it's super replayable because you can keep trying to get shorter times on the Make a Star levels and whatnot. I just think it's what makes Katamari Damacy in general super fun is just its uniqueness and its charm. Like, it reminded me kind of Pikmin the first time I played it, just because it's so unique and there's no other games really like it at all. I still have yet to try any of the other games in the series because it's like they haven't remade any of them, and I think they're only on like the PS2, PS3 era, which aren't like backwards compatible or anything, so it's hard to play it even if I get my hands on a copy. Kirby Superstar Ultra is the only Kirby game that'll appear on the list. There are other solid Kirby games. Forgotten Land barely missed it, but I just have so many memories playing Superstar Ultra. I think it's one of the best DS games out there. Yeah, it's just basically the essence of Kirby. It is legitimately like the perfect Kirby game because Superstar was already such a great game, and this is an example of how a remake should be, where it takes the original game and literally like doubles it and more. Like, it adds so much more content to the original that it's crazy, and it's just a really fun, really good game to play because all the modes are so varied too, because it's like you can play as Meta Knight in one of them. One of them is just the standard Kirby experience where you go and fight King Dedede. You have the arena and the true arena where you fight all the bosses in a row. It's just overall a really fun game. Skyward Sword HD. This one was a tough one because I was having a hard time deciding whether I wanted to rank Skyward Sword above or below um, Breath of the Wild. But I do like it a little more because it has that slight openness to it where at one point you can go to any of the locations and complete them in any order. So there is that little bit of openness, but the story is probably one of the best stories in the series. And while people complain about a lot of different things about the game, I really think they're pretty minor, and like they're valid in some aspects because Zelda has set such a high standard, and it is a bit on the lower end for a Zelda game, but it's still really solid. And I still remember the release cycle for this game, like the original, back in like the 2010 2011 area of time, and just being so excited because it was the first Zelda game that I was going to get to experience for the first time on like the release day. So I have that memory tied to it as well. And I just really like that one, it's an origin story, which is interesting, and it also has different villains other than Ganon slash Ganondorf. Then at number 41, we have Yoshi's Island. Sorry, I'm going to shift a little bit. My knees have been really sore for some reason. I don't know why. But since I'm using the laptop webcam, I can sit like this, I suppose. Hopefully you can still see me fine. I could check, but I don't really want to. Coming in at number 41 is Yoshi's Island. I haven't played a whole lot of Yoshi's Island, I'll admit, but just looking at it, it is probably one of the most beautiful looking Super Nintendo game. Like, it's amazing. Like, Donkey Kong Country looks good, don't get me wrong, but Yoshi's Island, the artistry and the graphics, it doesn't even look like a Super Nintendo game. It's just the way that they were able to take the limitations and make like an art style out of it is super cool. And no other, like, they've tried so many times to make other Yoshi's Island games, but it just doesn't feel the same because they try to make them like baby games always, almost. But like, Yoshi's Island is probably one of the easier Super Nintendo games, but it's not a baby game, it's still a Super Nintendo game. But yeah, again, it's been a while since I've played it. It's just gut feeling again. And I've never finished it, I don't think. Alright, moving on to the next 10. I think I'm going to cut my explanations down a little bit, just so that I'm not creating like a 3-hour-long video. What am I at? Oh, I'm only at 23 minutes. I feel like I've been talking forever. Okay. So we have 30 through 40 here. Or 31 through 40, sorry. So Mario & Luigi Bowser's Inside Story. This one dropped quite a bit because it was at like 22 or something on my previous list. I think it's solid. It's definitely my favorite of the Mario RPGs, and the writing in it is super good. It's just genuinely a really fun game to play, and it's super interesting to play as Bowser, and all of the interactions that they have between like the Mario Bros being inside of him and what's going on outside of him. It's like, it felt like they hit a lot of marks that they could have. Like, it didn't feel like they left any stones like unturned with that concept. Like, it was just super fun, super well explored. And you'll notice that I have Bowser's Inside Story here, the original, as opposed to the 3DS version. I think the 3DS version just dumbed it down, and I don't really like the new graphics for the Mario and Luigi games, I'm going to be honest. I preferred the pixel art. But yeah, that's about all I have to say on that. Zelda Link to the Past. My experience with A Link to the Past is interesting because I've really not played a whole lot of the original base game. The only time that I've beaten it is through a randomizer, but it really set, like, I think more than Ocarina of Time. Like, Ocarina of Time set the standard for 3D Zelda, but I think A Link to the Past really set a standard for Zelda in general. It had a really solid story. It's a long game too, like for even like today's Zelda standards, it's pretty long because you go through the first three dungeons, then you have the second half of the game where you go to the Dark World and take out, is it like six dungeons there or something like that? But yeah, it's just solid. That's about all I have to say about it because I haven't played it that much recently. It's just there because I think it's better than Bowser's Inside Story. It's a better Zelda game than Skyward Sword. I kind of compared, like when I was looking at games in the same series, I kind of compared them with each other to decide where it should go. But yeah, moving up, Chrono Trigger is a new game that I like, not new, but new to me that I just played this year. I didn't play any further than I did in the when I was streaming it. I haven't gotten the chance to yet. I'd really like to, but it's just a really fun. It's a really interesting story too because I'm so used to like Square Enix doing these Final Fantasy games that are really deep in their stories and it can be kind of hard to get into. But Chrono Trigger just feels like a more relaxed nature um, in the story, and it probably has my one of my top five favorite soundtracks of all time. Like I could name every track from the game probably if you played me 5 seconds of it. Um, Partly because I have the piano book with every track from the game, but that definitely does help. But also the battle system in it is really unique and interesting, and it's not something I've ever encountered before in any other game. But yeah, it's just genuinely solid. Also, I forgot Super Mario Bros. 3 was an NES game. This is definitely the best. It's just the pinnacle of the NES, I think. Um, like, I don't even think of it as an NES game. I think of it as a Super Nintendo game because I I have beaten the original. Obviously, I beat it on the NES Classic, I think, or whatever it's called, the online thing. I've beaten it on there, and that was the first time I ever beat it, beating every level as well. Like I beat every level in the game because there were a few levels towards the end that I physically like felt like I couldn't beat when I was a kid, but it didn't feel as hard this time around. I think it's a really well balanced game for the NES as well because just a lot of those um, older games, especially on the NES, feel unfair, like unfairly difficult at sometimes. Like the difficulty curve is terrible, but I felt like through replaying it, it feels like it genuinely has a really, really solid level curve. And it set the standard for 2D Mario as well. Like everything now follows its template. Um, but yeah, I think it's genuinely like the pinnacle of Mario 2D platformers. Um, yeah, just by far, nothing even comes close. And you'll see, well, like you saw it, there's nothing below it on the list. Partly because I haven't finished Super Mario World. I haven't really played much of it. I've never really been able to get into it or really care for it in my times trying to play it. Um, but yeah, someday I'll have to go and finish it. I know it's a pretty hot debate whether Super Mario Bros. 3 or Super Mario World is the better 2D Mario game, but I think Super Mario Bros. 3 takes the cake. I also have a lot of fun nostalgia playing that game because I had it on the Game Boy Advanced, and like my cousin showed me all the secrets in the first world, and him and I were really close when I was a kid, like sharing like Mario secrets and stuff like that. Like he would send me walkthrough pages over email for Mario 64 DS. Um, and tell me where all the warp whistles were in Super Mario Bros. 3. And I remember the first time I beat Super Mario Bros. 3 when I was a kid, I like freaked out and I was like, I gotta tell my cousin. Like that's the first thing I think of. I'm like, he'll be so proud of me. Donkey Kong Country. These were two games that I pit against each other, and I was like, which one would I rather play? I think Donkey Kong Country has the slight edge over Mario Bros. 3, and this one I'm playing right now with my girlfriend. I don't think I've said that on like any platform, but yeah, I do have a girlfriend now. Um, we've been playing Donkey Kong Country because she moved back to her home state, and we were trying to find games that we could play online, and we can play the Super Nintendo stuff online. So we've been playing through Donkey Kong Country 1 online. It's been super fun. We haven't quite gotten through it yet. We've got 3 levels, I think. But it's genuinely amazing what Rare was able to do with, like, a character that was just, like, a random antagonist in the arcade Mario games. Like, they genuinely made a really solid game with some really innovative ideas, like all the animal friends. All of the enemies in that game are super recognizable as well. And the way the graphics look as well, and the soundtrack are all reasons to love Donkey Kong Country. It's one of the best 2D platformers out there. Then we have WarioWare Smooth Moves. WarioWare Smooth Moves, I frequently forget exists. I forget that I had it, but like I still remember we bought it when I was on vacation at a Kmart before they closed because I think they were having their closing sale and they had WarioWare Smooth Moves just in a bin, and I went and bought it, and I was like, because I was like, this is the only game that I can find here because Kmart wasn't really like a video game store. But I was like, hey, I recognize Wario. I'll buy this game and see what it's all about. And I think it is by far, it's one of the best uses of the Wii Remote that they ever had. Like, having all the different unique positions that you could hold the remote in for all the different micro games. And the micro games themselves were just all really unique. I don't think any WarioWare game has even really come close to topping Smooth Moves, just because I think it was perfect for the Wii with the motion controls being used for the micro games. It just offers a lot of variability. Variety. I didn't mean variability. A lot of variety in the micro games. Yeah, it's just a super solid, super fun game. I just remember having a lot of laughs with my sister when we were kids playing it. Because it's like everything happens so fast, you have to figure out what you're doing in the span of like a split second. But it's super fun. Then is Zelda Link Between Worlds. I think this game is like heavily underrated. I never really hear it talked about, but the drawing idea is super cool. The game looks really cool. It's like a top-down Zelda game, but it's like almost 2.5D, and it's in the world of A Link to the Past. But it's like that's pretty much the only thing that it puts in common with A Link to the Past, other than having a light and a dark world. It like uses the same map and everything, but other than that, it's still a unique like story from what I remember. But yeah, I just thought the idea of like going into the wall was super unique and super cool, and it was really innovative as well. It's kind of sad that it was the only like original Zelda game that we got on the 3DS, other than Triforce Heroes or whatever it was called. But that doesn't really count. Then right after that is another Zelda game, and these two, again, I put them against each other, and I was like, they could flip-flop on which one I like more, but I just really like the open-worldness of the ocean in Wind Waker HD. I never really liked the original Wind Waker, but when I played Wind Waker HD, I fell in love with it because you can, like, while you're sailing across the ocean, you can look at all your sea charts, you can look at different things on your touch screen on the gamepad while you're going across the ocean on the top screen. And again, it's a unique Zelda game in that it has that ocean exploration. Like Phantom Hourglass has it, but it's not nearly to the level of Wind Waker. And say what you will about the art style, but like it hasn't aged at all. It still looks really wonderful to this day, in my opinion. But yeah, they didn't add too many quality of life updates to Wind Waker HD other than making it look really good. But the Swift Sail is a pretty major upgrade, and the fact that they streamlined the Triforce collecting portion of the game. Alright, next at number 32 is a new game from this year, and I do allow compilations on this list. This is the first compilation. There is, I think, one more up higher on the list, but I do allow compilations because it's a game. It's the price of a regular game, so I feel like I should be allowed to put, and it's my list, my rules, but I feel like I should be allowed to put a compilation on my list. But Sonic Origins is really solid. It has one game that's kind of meh, one game that is okay, and two games that are really, really solid. So I think it's worth it just for Sonic 2 and Sonic 3. Sonic 1 is... it's okay for the first half, and then it's just not fun. Sonic CD is fun all the way through, really. There's not really any level that I have complaints with in Sonic CD. It's just boring, because it's so easy. Like, playing Sonic 1 and then immediately playing Sonic CD, you get, whiplash, because, Scrap Brain Zone is some of the hardest, in an annoying way, too. It's, one of those things where it's not even satisfyingly hard, it's just annoying. Scrap Brain Zone is absolute trash. It is my least favorite Sonic level that exists. And then going to Sonic CD and being like, oh, this is a cakewalk, is, a lot of whiplash. But then Sonic 2 and Sonic 3, which is really what I'm judging this on. Because you can't bring it down because Sonic 1 is there. It's just it's just there. It's extra. Sonic 2 and Sonic 3 really make this pack, and I really enjoy playing them. And Sonic Mania made me fall in love with Sonic, and then I bought Sonic Origins to try out all 4 of those classic games. And it is really cool how they paired together Sonic 3 and Sonic and Knuckles as well to make it one big game. It's just a really solid bundle, and Sonic 3 is for sure one of my favorites. And Sonic 3 alone I would put higher than Donkey Kong Country, which is kind of what I was judging this on. And I will admit I've been turned into a decently big Sonic fan because of both this game and Sonic Mania. Then we have Mario Galaxy 2, which is one of the better Mario 3D platformers. It's not the best, but it's just really solid. I've only played through it once. There's a lot of content in it for a Mario 3D platformer with all the green stars. I didn't find a whole lot of the worlds that memorable in Mario Galaxy 2. As many as, Mario Galaxy 1, I'm gonna spoil it, is higher on the list. I just don't find as many of the worlds as memorable in Mario Galaxy 2. I remember specific levels way more in Mario Galaxy 1 than I do in 2. And I do respect the innovation on the new power-ups, but I just don't think they're that cool. Cloud Mario is a unique idea for sure, but it's kind of meh, and same with the Boulder one, too. Yoshi is a really cool addition, though, and he has his own abilities, which is really, really nice. That almost makes me want to put it higher than Mario Galaxy 1. But that's it for 31 to 40. Now we can scroll up, and there's Mario Galaxy 1. But we're at number 21 to number 30. So we're getting up into the top 25 area now. Mario Galaxy 1 is next, right after Mario Galaxy 2. Again, I couldn't decide which one I liked more. I think it's more a matter of personal preference because I think they're both, like, they're kind of almost interchangeable. They're relatively the same experience. Mario Galaxy 2, you could argue, has more to offer, but again, I just think Mario Galaxy 1 has the better, more memorable levels, is what sets it apart, I think. But I don't really have that much to say about it because everything there really applies to Mario Galaxy 2. And it was just really innovative for its time. That was the first, kind of like Skyward Sword, this was the first Mario game that I, like, was in on the release cycle. Like, I was following all the updates and following the game. I remember it was, like, the big gift for me for Christmas that year. And I got to play it, like, a couple weeks early or something because I went to my aunt's house and she had it, and I played through, like, the first world and absolutely loved it. Next on the list is Animal Crossing New Leaf. And I think it's the only Animal Crossing game that really deserves to be on my top 50 list. I have a lot of nostalgia for City Folk, because that was the one that my sister and I got into Animal Crossing with. I do like New Horizons, but it's just not... I don't think it topped New Leaf. New Leaf just had so much content. I haven't played it in a while, but I just really like the structure of being the mayor and being able to build your public works projects. I really like the island. Like, I think that is what makes New Leaf so much better than New Horizons, is being able to go to the island and doing those tours. Doing tours with people online was super fun, too. And I just think the furniture variety, that's one thing that I'm big on, is because I hoard stuff in real life. I would try to collect all of the furniture in New Leaf, and that was always super fun, even if I never really got to do it, because I would always play, like, really heavily for, like, a week or two and then just stop. But yeah, I really like New Leaf, and it's definitely the best Animal Crossing game in my opinion. Next we have the Resident Evil 2 remake. I never got to beat this because I got too scared, if I'm being honest, because I'm not a big horror game person. But Resident Evil 2, like, it just... I'd never played a game like that before that was so heavy on the survival. And, like, it was really immersive just with how the lighting was as well. Like, the lighting was perfectly done, along with, like, just... And this is an aspect that was present in the original, but just the feeling that if you get too reckless, you will screw yourself over later because you won't have any ammo to go around or any, like, med pack, because all your supplies are limited. So, and just, even though I haven't beaten any of the stories before, just the... Because I know they aren't... It's not that long, but, like, the replayability of it, trying to get through it using less resources and getting through it, in less time. It's a really solid game. And you know it's solid because it's one of the only non-Nintendo games on the list. You'll notice I'm a big Nintendo fanboy. It's just revealing that. Then we have Majora's Mask 3D. One of my favorite Zelda games. I really don't like Majora's Mask, the original. I actually would say that, I don't hate it, but it's just, I would not play it. I hate the day cycle mechanic. I think it's really dumb. The way that it's implemented in the original, however, and you may be thinking it's not any different in the remake, but what's different is that you can create I almost said permanent temporary saves. Permanent saves. It's either at the owl statues or anywhere. I can't remember. But what's annoying in the original is the fact that when you save in an owl statue, it's not a permanent save. It's just a quick save, basically. it's like a suspend almost, where then when you go in, if you because what made it annoying was I would play it on the collector's edition disc on the GameCube, and that version particularly was really prone to crashing. So I'd have so many times where I would lose an entire day cycle's worth of progress because I saved in an owl statue, but it's only temporary. Once you start your game up, if it crashes, then you go all the way back to the beginning of that day cycle, which I just found really annoying. But again, similar to Ocarina of Time 3D, but to a greater degree, I just think Majora's Mask 3 improves on the original so incredibly much to the point where it became a game that I loved, where before it was like an unbearable game that I never wanted to play after trying it the first couple times. And it was also the first Zelda game that I ever 100%ed, because it really does hold your hand, but it's kind of nice where you have the journal, the bomber notebook or whatever, that keeps track of all your quests and everything. I just found it super cool. Next is Smash Bros. Ultimate. It's got to have a place on my list, but I'm not honestly a huge fan of Smash Bros. Just because I don't play it alone. It's one of those games that I only ever play with people, and that's the only time that I ever really have that much fun playing it is when I'm playing with friends. Where I felt like other Smash Bros. Like, this is definitely the best Smash Bros. Game, don't get me wrong, but I just felt like the other Smash Bros. Games had much better single player experiences. Like, I don't know what it is. It might just be because I have fallen out of this, what made the series fun. Like, it's just not my genre anymore or something. But I just felt like classic mode and the other ones, and all the single player modes in general, were just way more fun and felt way more rewarding and replayable before. Like Smash 3DS, I beat classic mode and all-star mode with every character, but I think I only did that for like 5 characters on Ultimate before I stopped. I beat World of Light, obviously, but otherwise I didn't really do classic mode or anything a lot. Next is Spider-Man PS4. I love this game, but my sister owns it, so I was only able to play like a good like 10 hours-ish, which is like nothing in that game before I had to give it back. But yeah, I don't have a whole lot to say other than just it's one of those games that once you pick it up, it's really hard to stop playing. It's just really really solid, and all the gameplay mechanics are super well designed, and um and it's an open world game again with a really solid story to back it up as well. I haven't really been spoiled on the story. I just know it's mainly from word of mouth, but also like from what I've experienced in only the first little bit of the game. It's a story that I actually want to see unravel, and it's actually interesting. Next is Viva Pinata, which surprisingly enough before I had ranked below Trouble in Paradise, but I just like Viva Pinata the original this much more than Trouble in Paradise the sequel. I just think it's a really fun game to come back to, because it's a sandbox game where you can do whatever you want with it. And speedrun it if you're me, but yeah, it's one of those games that I have a stupid amount of knowledge about in my head. Like, I have so many variants memorized. I just have fun memories of, like, my sister and I would actually, like, create tests for each other, like, on Word, because that was the first time I figured out how to do, like, the underline. I figured out you could space and underline to make, like, a blank, and I would have, like, fill in the blank, questions about, like, different residency requirements, visit requirements, and variant requirements. Um, and her and I would quiz each other on it really frequently, and I just really like the designs of the pinatas, too. It's just one of those things where you can tell that a decent amount of thought went into it, and I didn't expect the game to be as fun as it was, because I got the Xbox 360, admittedly, just to play Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts, and my parents got me, like, the disc that was, like, you could flip it over. It had both in it. It had Nuts and Bolts and then Viva Pinata, and I'd never heard of Viva Pinata before, but I got it because it came with Nuts and Bolts, and I actually fell in love with Viva Pinata more than I did with Nuts and Bolts. Next is Town of Salem, which is a like it's an online game, which normally I don't like online games, but I was first introduced to Town of Salem in the summer of last year. Yeah. So I don't have the experience that other people have with the game because it's pretty old, and I didn't realize it was as old as it was, but it's had so many updates to it that yeah, it's like a brand new game now compared to what it was like in what was it like 2014 or something when it released. But it's just genuinely a really fun game, and it's an online game, so it's like every game that you play will be different, and they just have so many roles in the game that it's super replayable. And even as someone who's really bad still at being evil, like it keeps me coming back to it because it's like I want to get better at these other roles, and then I also have roles that I haven't even played Coven. I bought it, but I haven't even played with Coven roles at all just because I'm still trying to get the classic roles down. Um but yeah, it's just a super fun game. Like it's a social deduction game that's I feel is better than Among Us just because there's so much variety in it. Like you have so many other things you can do. Yeah, I don't know. I don't really have a whole lot more to say, but I've been like it's one of those games that I obsess with every now and then. Um okay. Twilight Princess HD. I love Twilight Princess. It is my favorite 3D Zelda game. I think it has a really solid story. I love how the game looks. I love the flow of the game. I think it scales really well. The music is amazing. But yeah, it's just that I've grown to like games that aren't like in the style of Zelda. Like The Legend of Zelda will always hold a place in my heart as some of the best games, but they aren't like I find now that I don't totally freak out over a new Zelda game like I do with other series. It's just like it is my cup of tea, but I just feel like there's better genres for me personally than Zelda, so it just won't get higher than this area of my list. There is one Zelda game that is higher than this, but not by much, I don't think. Um, but yeah, Zelda Twilight Princess is about as good as a Zelda game will get. It's super fun. It's just not very replayable is the only thing. Like I find that I like shorter games that are more replayable. Like they incentivize you to beat them faster. That's why I really have found that I really like Sonic. Well, it's either I like massive, like I would call Zelda a medium-sized game. I either like massive games that are like 60 hours or more, or like tiny games that are like 2 hours or less. Um, and I would call Zelda like a medium game that's probably like 20 to 40 hours in there somewhere. That just doesn't appeal to my taste as much because it's too long to be replayable, but it's too short to really fully invest yourself in for a really long period of time. But again, it's a solid game and I really enjoy it. Pikmin 1. Pikmin 1 has a lot of flaws. I have the most nostalgia for it because it is the first game that I ever played. Um, I have like random memories of like when I was like 4 years old sitting and playing Pikmin at our old house. Um, so I have that game like memorized, which is why I speedran it for a little while. Um, Again, it's one of those games that just incentivizes you to get faster because you have the 30 in-game days to finish, and it tracks your days, so it incentivizes you to beat it in less days every time because it tracks your record. And it's just a super fun game because there's so much variety in ways you can play it. You can either speed through it, or you can take your time and grow up your resources, Pikmin. You can grow up your Pikmin and numbers and get it to where it doesn't really even matter if you lose any Pikmin. You can just go in guns blazing on all the enemies because you have 999 red Pikmin. But yeah, it's just that variability and the incentive to get faster. Like, it's a pretty bite-sized game. Like, you can pretty easily, well, yeah, relatively easily, knowing the game, beat it in less than 2 hours. But it's just the replayability that keeps me coming back to it, and the nostalgia, I will admit. Okay, but now we're getting into the top 20. So we have some interesting games here. Some may not surprise you. Some may. But I'm going to take a sip of my Pepsi. Checking my time. Man, I have not had to talk this much straight in a while. My throat is a little sore. Whew. All right. So top 20, we have Mario Odyssey, which I don't know how they were going to top this. It was so innovative to have the cap to be able to take control of random enemies and stuff. Because that just adds so much variety in the abilities. Because for a while, I was thinking, like, they're going to run out of ideas for power-ups for Mario eventually. Like, there's only an extent of what he can do without it just being totally out there and weird. But just give him the ability to take control of anything he wants. And there you have it. It's Mario Odyssey. Some people complain about how easy it is to get some moons, but I love it. And they said specifically that the point was so that you could just turn the game on, get a moon, and in relatively a short amount of time, and then turn it off. I really like how many moons there are. It's a nightmare to 100%. It's one of those games where it's, if you were to 100% it, it would be an absolute nightmare. But I've never 100%ed it. I've never really cared about 100%ing Mario games. But I don't know how they're going to top it, just because it legitimately is a perfect Mario game. And you'll see that through, like, a lot of these top games. It's like, in my opinion, they're like generally the perfect game of their category. Yeah, it's just fun. It's not a game that I come back to a whole lot, but when I do, it's like, I just remember how amazing it is. Like, it's really stylized in the art as well, so it's pretty to look at. And it's just fun to play, and the controls are really fluid. Okay, moving on. Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze. I don't know why I didn't put Returns on here. That was kind of a miss on my part. I just kind of forgot about Returns. That should be on here somewhere above 3 at least, but we'll get it next year, maybe, if I remember. It should be telling that I forgot it, though, I suppose. But Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze was almost like a total return to form for Donkey Kong Country. I think it could have been better, but all the levels in that game, like, it's pretty short by 2D platformer standards. It's kind of the standard to have 8 worlds plus maybe a secret world. Tropical Freeze has 6 and I think 1 secret level or something like that. So it's generally a shorter game than your average 2D platformer. Although the original Donkey Kong Country did have 6 worlds. But all the levels are really memorable, I felt like. And the theming was super nice. The boss fights are something that was really stellar in this game. It is hard to make, like, boss fights in 2D platformers that are genuinely, like, interesting. And this game does it really well. And David Wise came back for this one, so the soundtrack is, again, really solid. But yeah, it's a really good 2D platformer. It's probably the best modern 2D platformer out there. I don't think I have anything ranked high. Well, there's Sonic Mania right there, but Yeah, it's one of the best modern 2D platformers out there because it's kind of a genre that's gotten dumbed down a bit now, just because it's so easy to make a little dinky 2D platformer. But yeah, that's how I feel about Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze. Moving on to Minish Cap. Minish Cap is my favorite Zelda game. I can confidently say that now because I had it below Twilight Princess, but thinking about it, it is so incredibly good. It's a shorter Zelda game, but I feel like it's more replayable, and the dungeons are all so unique with how they use the Minish abilities. I love how the game looks. I love all the like items that you get in the game and how they're used. It's just all in all like the best Zelda experience in my opinion. But that's about all I have to say about that. Metroid Dread next. Metroid Dread dropped a lot. It was my third favorite game on my list last year. Like, third of any game. It was my third favorite video game, period. And now it's dropped to 17. This is another one of those games, like I've been saying, that is short but repeat or replayable. I have yet to replay it though, and I never beat the final boss. I got on the final boss and just stopped and never beat it. I did start replaying it on a bus ride a bit ago or something. Um, I think. Yeah, there was like a bus. It was like on a band trip. That was when I. Sorry, I got distracted by something. But there was a bus ride a bit ago that I played it on the bus and had a good time. It's super fun. The way they design the Emmy zones is super good. Like it gives you that perfect amount of anxiety. You know what I mean? Like it's not necessarily afraid. It's just the feeling that something is chasing you and it is an unstoppable force that just it doesn't it doesn't like send chills down my spine or anything, but it just makes me panic while I play, which makes me make more mistakes, which makes me get caught more. It's like it's perfectly designed in that way. Um, Although it's kind of something that happens in the Metroid games in general, but I just felt like you got a little too powerful towards the end, where it just felt like you were wiping the floor with those things, and it was like all of a sudden you had no fear of them. But that'll happen, and I think that was kind of the point. But yeah, Metroid Dread, super fun game, one of the best on the Switch. Banjo Tooie is next. The sequel to Banjo Kazooie, which at first I used to say I felt like Banjo Tooie was the better game, but I just had more nostalgia for Banjo Kazooie. I can confidently say that's not the case. I love Banjo Tooie. It's a really solid 3D platformer, but it's just it feels too big. Like it felt like there was just too much that they wanted to do with it, and they just threw it all in there. Not as bad as sorry, not as bad as Conker's Bad Fur Day. That was just like it's fun, but it's kind of like a mess where it just shifts all over the place with what you're doing gameplay wise. Banjo Tooie is still a really solid game. Obviously, it's number 16 in my games of all time. Um, it's just not as good as the original, but um, yeah, it's still super fun. The worlds are well designed. In general, like I said, the worlds just feel a bit big and empty, but I still felt like a lot of the puzzles were expanded on from the first game really well. Like it took what worked in the first game and it expanded on it really well. It just felt like there was too much. Like the worlds were too big. The transformations, having them in every level, I don't think worked because they didn't feel as innovative. But generally, it's really good. Next, we have the Metroid Prime trilogy, which I will say, again, it's a compilation, but the one that I've played a lot of. I played a lot of two, when I was in junior high, and I haven't really touched it since then. And then recently I played 1 about 60% of the way through ish, and I've never played 3 still. But I still wanted to put the trilogy on here just because I've played 1 and 2 and I really like them, and I know I'll really like 3. But the fact that it's this high and I haven't even beaten any of the games on it should tell you how good of a game I think it is. Like, from what I've played, I just really enjoy it. At first, I didn't really get it because my dad, Metroid Prime is his favorite game ever. And I never really understood why. But, like, because it was his favorite, I would try it a bunch and get through, like, maybe an hour or two of gameplay, and just, I was never able to latch on to what was going on and what I was supposed to be doing. But after playing Super Metroid, actually, it got me to appreciate the structure of Prime a lot more, because it coincides with each other, and the transition from 2D to 3D is flawless. Like, the way that they did it and kept the same sort of abilities that Samus has in 2D and translated them over to 3D, it's legitimately mind-blowing how perfect they were able to do it. Perfectly, they were able to do it, sorry. Grammar. But yeah. Next we have Sonic Mania, which blew my mind last year. As you can tell, I got into a bit of a craze with it. Like, I speedran it and everything. I would not be able to do a run of it now because I haven't played the game in so long. But, I genuinely love it. It's like every single level is unique and it uses its mechanics well. Like, it's the perfect Sonic game because there's a good amount of exploration you can do in the levels, but also there's a definite really fast path in all of the levels as well that you can take to blow through them. And it's really creative how they were able to do, like, the whole Act 1 thing, where it's more like it's the original level, like all the zones kind of combined together. And then the second act uses the same sort of feel, like the same general ideas that the original area had, but adds, like, its new flair in. And it does, like, a really good job of, like, taking mechanics and sticking to it, like the Chemical Plant Zone Act 2 having the green liquid that you inject in there to make you jump really high, or the zip lines in Green Hill Act 2. Yeah, then the new zones fit in perfectly, like Studiopolis is amazing. I really like Press Garden. I think Press Garden Act 2 is probably my favorite level in the game. Titanic Monarch is a really strong final level as well. Like, I think it's one of the best. Like, final levels, I feel like, are pretty hard to do in 2D platformer. Well, in any game, really. And Titanic Monarch nails it. And it's just a super replayable game. Like, I could play through the game in one sitting and, yeah, just have a blast playing it. And the multiplayer is pretty fun and underrated too. Like, my brother and I play it a decent amount, where you race each other on different levels in the game, and it's super fun. Pikmin 3 Deluxe. Man, I'm starting to get tired, which is a good thing because normally I have a hard time sleeping on Christmas Eve night. But I'm getting there. Alright. Pikmin 3 Deluxe at number 13. Originally, I actually flipped the place of Pikmin 3 and Pikmin 1, because before, I would say that Pikmin 3 was probably my least favorite Pikmin game because it was too easy. But thinking about it, I don't think that's a bad thing. Like, a game doesn't have to be hard to be fun. Like, I will say that. Like, I used to be a hardcore gamer that would say, like, if a game doesn't challenge me, there's no way I can really enjoy it. But there isn't really a lot of merit to that. Like, some gamers may feel that way, that's why they play Elden Ring and Dark Souls. But Pikmin 3 Deluxe, it's an easy game. It has a couple moments of slight difficulty, but it's definitely no Pikmin 2. Um, but like it's a really pretty game to look at, and it's just genuinely relaxing and fun to play. Like there's they did the day limit perfectly as well because you control your destiny with the day limit. Like it's not hard to get enough juice to stay above um like a game over, but the threat is there and it's thematically appropriate as well, which is super cool. The rock Pikmin and the wing Pikmin are really interesting as well because they strayed away from just using colors. Um, and they just made so many quality of life improvements to what worked in Pikmin before, like the charge rather than like switching the swarm to a charge. I think worked really well. Um, Being able to charge like a specific color at a time was so much better than having to try to split them up as you would in the original two and pick the right Pikmin and have them actually cooperate with you. They just work a lot better in Pikmin 3. That and Bingo Battle is definitely the best. Well, I guess Pikmin 2 is the only other one that had multiplayer, but Bingo Battle is super fun. Um, yeah, it's genuinely really enjoyable. And the fact that they finally made the story co-op was really nice. But yeah, it's Pikmin 3. Xenoblade Chronicles X is a game that I haven't played in a while. I never finished it, mainly because the story never really inclined me to. It doesn't have the best story in the world, and I've never really been able to get invested in it. But it is one of the well, it probably is the best game for exploration and open world. It's probably the best open world game I've ever played. Just because you have so much open to you in the beginning of the game and so much to do on the overworld and just so much area to explore, and like you can map stuff out on the bottom screen. It was so satisfying walking around and installing the probes on the bottom screen so that you could see more of the map. It was super cool. Um, just gameplay. I think it might be the best like gameplay in a Xenoblade game still, just because of how addicting it is to play. Like there are definitely some times in the other Xenoblade games where it's like I kind of just want to watch a cutscene because I'm not enjoying what's going on in the game right now, like gameplay wise. But I never really felt that with X. It was the opposite problem, where the story wasn't very inclining for me to continue, but the gameplay made me want to keep, like made it really hard to put down. And then when you finally get the mech, the Skell, I think it's called, it's like you suddenly can move across the world so much faster. It's just it's a super fun game to play, and I really need to try to beat it sometime. Super Metroid was the game that got me into the Metroid franchise at all. And it took me a while to play it. I played it for the first time like last year, I think. Either last year or the year before was the first time I played Super Metroid. God, why does my nose itch so much? Jesus Christ, I've been itching it for like the past minute or two straight. God damn. Um, Super Metroid is just it does what it does perfectly. It's so thematic with like how isolated you feel on the alien planet, and just the way that it's like it encourages you to explore new areas and um just it it was the pinnacle of the Metroidvania like sort of genre, right? Where it's like you start with a decent amount of upgrades and then you lose them, and then you gradually get more powerful as the game goes on. Like at the beginning you die a decent amount because you're so weak. And then you start getting energy tanks and different weapon upgrades. God, This is so annoying. But yeah, you get different weapon upgrades and energy tanks, and you start feeling almost invincible by the end. But yeah, it's just a super well designed game. And now we're at the top 10, which probably are, there's like no surprises in here. But at number 10, I was kind of surprised this made my top 10, really. But Stardew Valley. Stardew Valley is a game that is really hard to put down. It is the perfect game of its genre, which is really funny because it's basing itself off of other games in its genre. Like, it's based off of Harvest Moon, but I think it is better than any Harvest Moon game that I've ever played. Um, just because there's so much to do in it. Like, you can basically do whatever you want and play the game however you want. You can emphasize on the combat, like going through the dungeons, which isn't just some side mode either. Like, the mines and Skull Caverns are super interesting and in how they're laid out and super fun to play through, like super replayable as well. Or you can like focus on making friends with the villagers and getting involved with the relationships with people in the town, and that tells its own sort of story. Like, there's no real story to speak of in Stardew Valley, but you get this backstory of the town and everything through the relationships you build with the other characters, which is super cool. And then there's just the farming aspect where you can farm on your farm, grow crops, have your animals and whatnot. And that all is still super solid. Like, I think even the farming is like top tier the way that it's designed. Yeah, there's just so much that you can do in the game that it would be a snub to keep it off the list or even out of my top 10 in my opinion, because once I get hooked on it, I am hooked for a while. Like, it's like I can't put the game down. And it's like once I play it, it's like it's one of those games where you don't quite get everything you want to get done in a day. So it's like you don't want to stop playing because it's like you don't want to forget where you were at and what you were planning on doing the next day. Like, it's always like you leave something hanging almost. But yeah, Stardew Valley. Great game. Next we have Banjo-Kazooie, which, surprising no one. It's my favorite 3D platformer. I think it's nearly a perfect game, or a perfect game in general. It's one of those games that I know like the back of my hand. It's funny because I used to have to stay after school because my mom had to work for like an hour or so after we were done in elementary school. So we would go to the computer lab, my sister and I had the game walkthrough, and in like second or third grade, I used to just spend my time retyping the guide in my own words, which is really weird, and I don't know why I did it, but it ingrained like a lot of that in my mind. So it's like I just memorize the game super fast, and I know how to get like absolutely everything in it. And it's just one of those games that I have a lot of those really early childhood memories of playing. Like, because my parents didn't have it originally. It was a game that I would always play when I went to my aunt and uncle's. And I just, like, remember, like, being little playing it and, like, barely being able to get past the first level or two. Being afraid of Snacker, as everyone is. I was afraid of Clanker as well, so I would always skip Clanker, because if you get all the Jiggies in the previous two worlds, you can skip Clanker's Cavern and go to Bubble Gloop Swamp. And I would usually get stuck around Freezezy Peak because I didn't know you could hit the snowmen. Like, stuff like that. Like, I have memories, like very vivid memories of playing that game. And it's just something that it'll never drop further than top 10 for me, I don't think, because it's just so memorable and nostalgic for me. Donkey Kong Country 2. I used to play this on the SNES back when I was younger in like elementary school, but I never really understood the appeal to it. I liked 1, but like I had always heard that 2 was this masterpiece, so I would keep trying it, and it wasn't until like 2 years ago ish that I finally played through all of it, and I just fell in love. They're like it's similar to Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, where every level or nearly every level is memorable in some way or perfect. Like they all have their own gimmicks, and I don't really know what sets apart Donkey Kong Country 2 more than Tropical Freeze for me. It might just be the fact that um, I just prefer the way, like the physics of the SNES games over the new ones. But I don't know. That's more of just a matter of preference for me. Okay, now we're into the games that are like totally not surprising, so I won't talk a whole lot about them. But Fire Emblem Three Houses, I love. I think there's too much content in the game. I debated putting it above Awakening, and even debated putting it above Xenoblade 1, but there's just too much in it almost, and I felt like the split routes could have been done a lot better because it's like the first half of the game is essentially the same every time. It's just the second half that has the totally different story based on which one of the four routes that you picked. And then the fact that one of the routes for some unknown reason has like 5 less chapters than the other ones or something like that. It might be even more. And it's just like I don't know. I felt like more could have been done to distinguish between the routes earlier on in the game. But yeah, I thought the cast of characters was really memorable, and it put me it like I love the game, and it looks really good for a Fire Emblem game. Not really for a Fire Emblem games look good, but it's like the transition to Switch was done really well, and it looks really good. Um, I just don't think the story is quite as solid as Awakening just because of the split routes, because it's like you get fragments of the stories for the main, like the overall encompassing lore and story from each of the different routes, and it's like you have to piece it all together, so it kind of comes out like all as a glob. Like you don't get all the information at once. You get some of it from one story, some of it from another. You get a backstory from this one, and like it's not as streamlined as like Awakening playing straight through the story as one cohesive sort of thing. And I guess I'm kind of talking about them both at the same time, but I compare them because they both have really memorable cast of characters. Fire Emblem Awakening saved the Fire Emblem franchise, so and I think even though Three Houses is on the Switch, I think the stylized cutscenes of Awakening look better still. Like the 3D models and the way that they were animated there look really good for a 3DS game. And I don't know. I prefer that over the like anime style that the cutscenes in Three Houses went for. But that's just me. Okay. Now we have the big debate here. I'll kind of talk about these two at the same time as well. But Xenoblade 1 and Xenoblade 2. People seem to go up in arms with which one is better, and a lot of people who love 1, I feel like if you love 1, you hate 2. Like it just seems like no one's like, oh, I love 1 but 2 is slightly under it. I feel like that doesn't happen as much as people just loving 1 and just putting 2 in the toilet and being like, oh, I never finished it, I couldn't get past the anime designs. There is, I will admit, there are things that you have to get past, in like phrasing it that way, in Xenoblade 2. Like, it's definitely more kawaii anime-y than Xenoblade 1. But it's not to the extent that everyone makes you want to believe. Like, it's not, it doesn't go that into it. But I believe that those more lighthearted moments in the story really give you more opportunities to grow more attached to the characters. Like, there was comedic relief in 1, but I don't know, it just felt like a lot of those moments in 2 were created to be more like the characters bonding rather than it being, oh, Ryan is dumb, Riki is a little odd. But they're both really good games. Top 5 for me again. They're both really good games, really solid. I just like 2 a bit more just for its characters, and I prefer the story and the gameplay quite a bit over 1. But then moving on to Pikmin 2. Pikmin 2, I always would say that Pikmin 2 is my favorite game of all time. It's not anymore. It has fallen. But it's still up there with it's just one of my it's one of my favorite games to just go and play again because it's nostalgic for me. I still have like the little picture of me holding up the copy of Pikmin 2 for Christmas that I got because it was like Pikmin 1 was my childhood game, and then like even though I was 4 years old when it came out, I still remember like being excited for it. And it was just a game that I played all the time. Like, I think one of my profiles had over 200 days played in the game, which is embarrassing. I don't know what I did for those 200 days, but I do remember having triple digits in my days on Pikmin 2. But it's really solid, really replayable. The amount of content there's a lot of content for a Pikmin game. The caves being, like, randomly generated offers a lot of replayability. And it has really high difficulty, too. And I will admit it has some fun, like, bullshitty difficulty as well that a lot of people don't like, but I do because I kind of know how it works now. But, yeah, Pikmin 2 is just... It's kind of like Banjo-Kazooie. It's always going to be where it is in the top 5 games of all time. It's just not going to fall. Because I've played it so much. Because I have the memories associated with it. I still remember, like, at one of my birthday parties, like, family birthday parties, I was forcing my grandparents to, like, watch me feed all of the enemies in the Picklopedia with Pick carrots when I was, like, 6 years old or something like that. But, yeah, it's just a fun game. It's another one of those games that kind of has the same sort of theme as the other games in my top 10. Once you start playing it, it's hard to stop. But, yeah, that's about all I have to say for Pikmin 2, especially since my voice is starting to go out. Next we have Xenoblade 2, Torn of the Golden Country. This was the first Xenoblade game that I finished, and it got me into the series because it's shorter than any of the other ones, and, well, you remember I streamed it because I didn't want to get myself into a giant, like, 100-hour story, but I wanted to know what Xenoblade was all about, so I played Torna before I even played Xenoblade Chronicles 2, and I still love it. It's, like, gameplay-wise, the battle system in that game is perfect. It's better than any other Xenoblade game. It's better than 3, even. Just the way that you can, like, switch to the blades, and they have certain things that they do when they switch in. And just the flow of combat in that game is so incredibly well done. Yeah, that's why I like Torna more than 2, and I just really like how it adds to the character of Jin, specifically, and Mithra as well. Like, the characters in Torn of the Golden Country, I had an easier time getting attached to, because I was one of the people who didn't like Rex, mainly because of the first impression. Because, like people say, you can tell who hasn't beaten the game, because a lot of the people who do like Rex are the people who beat the game, because in the beginning he is a little unbearable. That's why I played Torna first as well. Jeez, I'm gonna puke or something. That's why I played Torna first as well, because I liked Laura more than I liked Rex. But yeah, overall, Torn of the Golden Country, I would say, is like a flawless game. And then we have Xenoblade Chronicles 3, which from what I've said about it, like, it's no surprise that it's my favorite game of all time now after playing it. Just leading up to the release, I was so hyped for it. Um, it might fall, like, even, like, to games that are already on here. I don't mean, like, something will overtake it that's new that I don't know. That's probably pretty likely, too. But, like, it might be recency bias. But I've been, like, I will say I streamed it, and then I never played it again until just, like, 2 weeks ago. I started it back up again. Not, like, started over, but I started doing the post-game stuff and doing quests that I hadn't done. And it's just, like, it is so incredibly addicting. And, like, 2 I thought had really solid characters, but 3, just every single character has time spent on them. Like, all 6 of the main characters have time spent on them, plus all of the heroes. Like, I felt like all of the heroes were dove into, I guess, into their personalities and their backstories just enough for them to not, like, to be minor characters, but still be, like, important enough to be like, oh, I remember Xeon, or, like, I remember Juniper. Like, it's like they're really, like, it makes them recognizable and memorable in their own right. Like, and I feel like that's a pretty big accomplishment, is just the characters. I would say the story takes a bit of a plummet around the, like, chapter 6, chapter 7 area, just because the end of chapter 5 is the best, like, story moments. Like, chapter 5 in general in that game is, like, the best story moments in a video game, period. But coming off of that, not necessarily emotional high, because it's not a high for sure, but, like, coming off of the emotions of that, it's hard to, like, get any, like, better than that. So that could be part of it, but that's the only real flaw I see, and that might be fixed with the DLC, because who knows what they'll add story-wise with the expansion. We'll find out. I'm not necessarily hoping for an epilogue, because I think the ending was pretty perfect. But, I don't know. We'll see what happens with what the future holds. But, yeah, there you have it. My top 50 games, and me rambling about them for an hour and a half. Thank you to those of you who did stick around for the entire video. I don't think it was probably a lot of you. Because, again, it was a lot of just rambling and given my list. But go ahead and leave a comment if you feel you want to talk about some of these games that, like, the spot resonated with you on my list and you agree, or some games that you're like, man, why wasn't this here? Or some games where it's like, why was this so low, or why was this so high? I would have a, can't figure out what I want to say. It would be fun to have debates in the comments, I will say, and I would respond to them. But yeah, like I said, I'm gonna probably post some senior recital videos soon, but otherwise I'm gonna be really busy with student teaching again this semester, so I will not be streaming until maybe summer. That if I have time during the summer, I'll pick it up again, but I don't even know about that. But you can look forward to my senior recital. I'm doing another one on my birthday, April 2nd, a Sunday, and it's going to be all Xenoblade music, so you can look forward to that. It's going to be super fun and super exciting. But I'll see you all later. I hope you all have a wonderful Christmas. Peace out. Where's the stop recording? There it is.